following President Obama's trip down to Cuba. Good morning, Alex Stone.
McGraw, good morning to you. And right now, I paint you a little picture here. We are in a park next to the capital of Cuba. The capital looks just like the U.S. Capitol, and in fact hasn't been used for years because it was seen as a sign of imperialist America. They are now redoing the Capitol. They are retrofitting it to make it so it is inhabitable again and going to be used for the ruling party. On a very windy morning here, folks are going to work. The buses are making their way around town, and it is a step back in time here. The streets are full of 1950s era American cars, Buicks, Fords, Pontiacs. We rode in a taxi the other day that was a 1950 Chevy, top down and blue. You can see when the embargo went into place here, and much of this society, at least business-wise and economy-wise, froze at that point.
Alex Stone, how much of the rank-and-file Cubans know what's actually going on?
Well, they seem to know. There's been quite a bit of coverage of President Obama's visit. This is a changing society because of the internet. There's not much internet on this island, but there are quite a few folks who are connected and a few Wi-Fi hotspots around where they huddle around and get on and pay, by Cuban standards, a huge amount to get online. And that is creating a much more open society. Amazingly, and granted, this is while the president's in town, with our Cuban press credentials, we can talk to anybody on the streets. They have talked to us. They've been very open and critical of their own government, something that would not have happened years ago. There are private businesses that, as of about 5 years ago, started opening up. In fact, today, the president and CEOs from big American companies like Marriott and Starwood and Google and PayPal are meeting with entrepreneurs here in Cuba. Entrepreneurs, something that wasn't allowed until a couple of years ago. So while this country still has a long way to go, and it's still very much a dictatorship, it's still a communist-controlled country, there are signs of change, and that's what the White House says it's pushing for today, saying that this country needs to take steps even more so forward.
Alex Stone, on that trip are a bunch of elected officials from both parties, and as you say, businessmen. Is this trip sort of signaling to the world that Cuba is open and that we can start traveling down there and businesses, and that Cuba is now open for business?
Well, in some ways, a trade embargo is still in effect. And today, President Obama telling ABC News during an exclusive interview that he doesn't see that trade embargo, because of Congress, going away before the end of his presidency. So there are still hurdles, and they've got to work around those hurdles. But Starwood is going to be opening up 3 hotels here by the year's end. Google setting up Wi-Fi hotspots. Airbnb, you can now book stays here. The U.S. airlines, as of this fall, United, Delta, Alaska, American, all the big ones are going to be flying here unrestricted, except that there still will be some restrictions on how you get into the country, for what reason, but you no longer need to be part of a big group to do it. It's getting very close to just being you book a ticket and you go. That it is opening up quite a bit more, but it is still a society with human rights issues. It's still a communist society. There's still a lot of hurdles here, and still, if you are very vocal against the government, you find yourself in trouble. And because of all that, there are still hesitations to what's happening here. But at the same time, the White House says it's time for this society to open up, and for it to become a democracy someday, it's got to begin these early steps of opening up.
Alex Stone, 2 more quick questions for you. Let's say there was somebody there, hypothetically, who was an ABC correspondent who wanted to bring back some Cuban cigars. Would that ABC correspondent be allowed to do that?
You can bring back $100 worth of Cuban cigars and Cuban alcohol. So there is, if there were an ABC correspondent who wanted to bring back a few Cuban cigars, that person could potentially bring back $100 worth.
Certainly understandable. What about Cuban baseball players? Are they going to be allowed to sort of join the major leagues and sort of come and go as they please?
They are, as a part of the new hiring rules that went into effect last week, announced by the White House. Businesses, including Major League Baseball, will be able to hire Cuban ball players, and for the first time, they can be Cuban citizens and come to the U.S. and play ball. That is huge, because Cuba is so incredibly into baseball. In fact, tomorrow the Tampa Bay Rays will be playing the Cuba national team here. That's a big deal here. They think that's really cool. It's been since the 90s, the last time an MLB game was played here. The Orioles got whopped by the Cuban national team at that time. So baseball, a very big deal here.
Yeah, and let's not forget there were Cuban baseball players getting on a life raft and sort of risking their life to get to the American shores to sign that $1 million baseball salary. So we certainly have come a long way.
Well, yeah, and this will make it where they don't need to make that trip. They simply will hop on a United Airlines flight and fly to America within a few months. So there are monumental changes going on. Not to mention, right now, Air Force One is parked at the Jose Marti Airport with the United States of America written on the side of it, the American flag on the tail. Who would have thought that just a couple of years ago?
Alex Stone live in Havana, Cuba for the unprecedented historic making trip. Alex Stone, be safe. Thanks for checking in.